So welcome to From Stuck to Limitless, the show where we bring you tips and special guests with topics to help you move from stuck to limitless. And this evening, it's no exception. We have a special woman, Miss Radonda Dobbins. She's a certified life coach, the producer of a syndicated radio, TV, and podcast show, among many other hats she wears. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to her so she can introduce herself and tell us what she does. Miss Dobbins, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, as you said, I am a certified life coach. I'm also trauma informed, and I work with clients who are trying to heal from narcissistic and abusive relationships. So I'm also anxiety certified as well. So I work with, folks who are really are stuck. They're stuck because of being in a relationship that was abusive and gaslighty and things like that. So that's basically what I do.
Thank you so much. And we know this these days. Don't know if it's because of COVID or this is something that's been going on for a long time. And because it's more in the news now, we're becoming more aware. Suicide rates has gone up, depression. How do you what's your process for getting someone from being stuck in depression or anxiety into a vibrant life?
Well, if they have clinical depression, I work with them as a coach, but I also encourage them definitely to also work with a therapist as well. But in my coaching practice, we would work through some of the trauma responses. We would work through some of the anxiety responses. We would talk about their baseline anxiety and try to get that down as low as we can with breathing and just exercises that we do and some exercises that we work on to notice when they're starting to feel those physical symptoms of anxiety or a panic attack, because that's where we're going to say, okay, we can stop this before it starts. And also just being able to lower that baseline, because all of us are equipped with fight or flight. If we're running into a lion out in the woods, we're either going to run or we're going to try to defend ourselves, depending on how close that lion is. So, but someone with anxiety or someone who has lived with a narcissist or even worked with a narcissist, it doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship or a familiar relationship. It could be a friend or someone that they're just close to that has done that gaslighting, the manipulating, and they're starting to, question their own. They are constantly at a higher state of anxiety than most of us are walking around at. So what we do is we work through trying to lower that baseline anxiety so that when, the lion appears, we're able to handle that better.
Yes,
that makes
that's
sense.
sort of similar to like I work with victims of sexual violence. So the effects of the trauma can manifest even in anxiety. So yeah, I sort of familiar with the steps you're describing. You're also the producer of Voices of Courage. Tell us about Voices of Courage and what you do there.
Well, Voices of Courage is it's a syndicated radio, television, and podcast show that was started by my personal coach, Ken D. Foster. I've worked with Ken doing summits and, things like that in the past. And just this December, he said, hey, my producer is leaving. Would you like to step up to that role? So what I do with that is, I help him bring in the speakers and kind of like, Pastor Patty, who's not here, but, she's the producer for this,
Right.
like she was saying what she does. She helps bring in the people and she just kind of helps behind the scenes. So I'm very excited about the new role because he brings in a lot of, bigger names like, Neil Walsh and, folks like that. So it's really neat to be able to interact and hear those people speak too.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
gain from their wisdom.
Okay, that's awesome. And congratulations again. And I know you wear a lot of hats. You are an activist in the community, you do charity work, you work with wildlife. Where do you find the time and how do you balance? You're a mom and how do you balance everything?
Well, it's definitely a balancing act. I've learned to use reminders. I've learned to schedule my time. And this may sound counterintuitive, but I have definitely learned that sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. So I've definitely learned the piece of self-care. I've learned, to start my day with, a quiet time, a reflection time. I meditate on a regular basis. So, I really bring the spiritual piece and the mental piece in as well, to help keep me grounded because, life happens and you can have everything written down in your calendar and, be ready to roll, and something comes in and throws you a curveball and you have to shift everything around. So it goes back to what I teach, which is mindset. It's just having the mindset of, okay, we can shift this, we can move this, or for me, it's also about having that curiosity mindset. And that's something that I teach my clients as well is, when you do get that curveball in the day, you've got all of these things going on. When you get that curveball, just to maybe ask yourself, oh, this is interesting. What next? And go from that. So for me, it's really about mindset and just trying to balance everything, be more organized on my calendar.
I'm glad to hear you mentioned self-care. Many, many years ago, I didn't know what self-care was. I didn't grow up with my mom or family around me mentioning self-care or even taking themselves as a priority. My mother gave everything she had to her children and everybody else. So over the years, I've learned to prioritize self-care, not just as a nurse, we teach our patients to take care of themselves, but oftentimes we don't do the same for ourselves. So for the past 2 years, I have been intentional about my self-care from morning until night. In the morning, I'll do my devotion, my gratitude and affirmations, make sure I eat properly, hydrate, exercise. And at night, I always do my gratitude journal. I find 3 things for which I'm grateful, plus 3 affirmations before I go to bed without fail. So no matter how bad my day went, I think I'm like, okay, there's got to be at least 3 things out there. And on this channel, From Stuck to Limitless, that's what we want our listeners to learn, that no matter what state they're in, you can find something to be grateful for, and you can get out of that rut that you're in. Wildlife, you champion wildlife. Tell us about something about that.
Well, I've always been, passionate about animals. I've always, I'm vegan. I don't eat my friends, is what I tell people. So I've always been passionate about animals, and I got involved in a local wildlife rehab here in the local Orlando area called Back to Nature. I actually got involved through my daughter, who was doing a Girl Scout project for them. And, we saw how hard the staff and volunteers work with very little money, very little, we're not a state funded agency. It's a privately run agency. We do get some help from the county and other, but most of our help comes from our donors. And when I was seeing, just the passion that the people who work there had, I decided that I would, become part of that. And I first started on the revenue committee, and then I became vice president of the board, and now I'm president of the board for that. So, I've worked in social services in the past. I've always worked for nonprofits. So I have a lot of experience with nonprofit funding. I have a lot of experience with, running nonprofits and what it entails. So, it was kind of natural for me just to pair that experience with nonprofits with my passion for animals.
That's amazing. So is there anything in particular that you need for your wildlife organization that you want to talk about or put out there, see if any of our listeners want to help?
Oh, that's wonderful. Actually, the financial donations are the best, especially right now, because we break ground for our new building on February 13th. So we will actually have to close. We have some ambassadors, what we call our ambassadors. They can't be released back into the wild because they have injuries that, they just wouldn't survive in the wild. And normally we have, folks come and see those for a $5 fee and things like that. And we can have on-site events. We won't be able to do any of that for probably a year. So we're looking at funding in other ways. So that's going to take a big chunk of our funding away. So financial donations are always good. We do have a list on Amazon as well. We always need food for the animals. And if people who are local to the Orlando area, they can, stop in and visit. And we take things like paper towels, bleach, any of those things. So, and old towels and sheets and things that we can use for bedding for the animals.
So do you want to tell them the name of the organization and where they can reach you for that particular?
Sure. The name of the organization is Back to Nature Wildlife Refuge, and the website is www.btnwildlife.com.
Yes, and
Or
we'll
no,
also.
actually, I think it's .org. It's .org, excuse me.
Okay.
So www.btnwildlife.org.
Okay, that's awesome. 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 Thank you so much for doing that. I
Thank
see
you.
also where you're a member of the Institute of Non-Ethic Science,
Noetic science.
Mind and Consciousness.
Yes, that's actually the science of mind and consciousness. It was started by an astronaut by the name of Edgar Mitchell. And he had an experience when he was, just floating around there out in space. And he just really started thinking about how our minds really do control so much of our experience in the world. And there's actually a lot of science behind that. I don't know if you're familiar with a lot of the quantum physics type stuff, but I'm kind of a geek, so I love learning, sciencey things. So this paired really well with me understanding that your mindset really, and I started in that and like when I was around in my 20s, just really learning about things like that, how your mindset really can influence the outcomes of things. And they've actually done scientific studies that prove that. There's like the double slit theory and things like that. And it's a fascinating organization. And they just, it's just scientists who come together and talk about, the mind and the consciousness and how our thoughts really do control, our surroundings.
Yes. To change your life, you just need to change your mindset. Is
Exactly.
one of your sayings. Yes. So
Yes.
I know you're a coach for victims who have been I don't like to use the word victims, who have been in a narcissistic relationship. So if for someone who is listening, how do they recognize that they're in such a relationship?
Well, and sometimes they don't. Not all of my clients come to me because I am a mindset coach as well. Not all of my clients come to me, knowing that. But one way to recognize it is by just, watching the behaviors of the person that they feel like they're possibly being oppressed or manipulated by. Is that person, gaslighting them? Can that person be wrong? Can that person ever say, oh, I made a mistake? Does that person blame everyone else? So there's a lot of signs that you might be dealing with a narcissistic personality. But there's another thing that, I help people with is that we overuse that word. I think in today's society, we say, oh, that's a narcissist, that's a narcissist. It's not necessarily, abuse doesn't necessarily have to be narcissism, but narcissism is always abuse. So I help my clients also separate that. So sometimes, they come to me and, oh, I think I'm with a narcissist and, that person's probably just a jerk, but I can help you with that too, So, but it's just walking them through the steps. And I have, specific questions that I ask my clients. And, if they're not sure, if you're just feeling like, something's not right about whether it's a familiar relationship, whether it's a, a job situation or a romantic relationship or even a platonic relationship. If there's just something where you're always feeling like you're walking on eggshells, or you're always feeling like you're in the wrong and, nothing you do is right, that type of thing, then, it's quite possible that you're dealing with a narcissist.
Yes. You use the term gaslighting, and I don't think many of our listeners may know what that means. Do you want to elaborate on what that term means?
Sure. Gaslighting, to me, another word I use for it is crazy making, because gaslighting is when someone makes your perception or your experience to be wrong. They might say, you might see them say, break a dish on accident, and you say, oh my goodness, that was my favorite dish, you broke it. No, I didn't. They're gaslighting you because they're, oh, but I just saw you. No, this was broken. I just picked it up and moved it, or they'll say something like that. It's very manipulative. And gaslighting can also be, particularly manipulative and concise. They can, start moving things around and telling you, changing the clock and just things like that, just to make you question yourself, because then that gives them, it's just like with domestic violence, it's about power and control. So that gives them the power and the control over you to do what I call crazy making. So gaslighting is essentially just trying to, it comes from a movie called, it was originally a play, and then they did a movie called Gaslight, where the person was, specifically doing particular manipulations just to try to undermine the victim to think that they were losing their mind. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what gaslighting is.
Thank you for the explanation. So what's next for Radonda?
Oh my goodness. Next for me, I've had some people pushing me towards writing a book. So I think that eventually that's going to happen. You mentioned I wear a lot of hats, so I don't have a date for that, but I've got a lot of stuff in my mind. So I do think that I'll eventually write a book on changing your mindset, and possibly specifically in dealing with trauma and narcissistic relationships. But I'm just really looking forward to jumping into this producer position, doing more seminars, definitely bringing in more one-on-one clients, and also offering up some more stuff for groups as well. I've done group meditations, I've done group mindset classes and things like that. But, I really want to break into doing a little bit more of that as well.
That's awesome. And I know you'll be as fabulous in whatever it comes up, because you're just amazing right now. Anything else you want our listeners to know about you?
About me? Well, if I could leave the listeners with just one thing, it's just, what you said earlier is something that I call my motto is you can change your life just by changing your mindset. If you change the way you perceive things, if you adjust that lens just a little bit, then, you can become limitless, and you can get out of that stuck.
Yeah, so you're perfect for the show, from stuck to limitless.
Exactly.
Yes. And where can our listeners find you?
They can find me at www.radondadobbins.com. So it's just my name. So, and they can also find me on Facebook in the same way, Radonda Dobbins Life Coach. So, you can find me there. I am on Instagram. I'm not on it as much as I need to be. So maybe that goes back to the what's next, possibly getting myself out there a little more on social media.
Yes. What about TikTok?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could do TikTok.
It's
I feel like
really
that's for
amazing.
kids.
I hesitated for a long time. It's really fun.
Really?
Yes. It
So
is
see,
fun.
maybe you just gave me one more thing to try out.
Yes, try TikTok. Thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation, and looking forward to having you next. So I'd love to have you again.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I'd love to come back.
Yes. Thank you so much, and Listeners, thank you for listening. See you next time on From Stuck to Limitless.
Bye.